I think I should specify before I get into my points about this. And listen, you're going to look at the title of this video and think I'm probably one of the stupidest people you've ever heard speak. And while some of that is true, I think I should specify that I think Joel Embiid is the best player in the NBA right now. I think the combination of his size and his talent makes him the best player in the NBA. I also think that NBA championships are decided off of eras. And what I mean by that is the teams that win in given eras, it's just decided. Right now, in the era of basketball, it is you either have to be a really good shooting team or you have to have a team that revolves around 2 or 3 guys that can do a lot of things. Look at the Milwaukee Bucks, right? They're one of the few teams of the last decade, not named the Cavaliers or the Warriors, to win a championship. They have a guy in Giannis Antetokounmpo, the head of the snake. He does a lot of things. He doesn't just score, he rebounds. He makes plays. He's an elite defender, not just on ball, but blocking shots, stealing passes. Giannis is at the top of his game right now, and he does a lot of things. Drew Holiday, elite defender, playmaker, guy who can shoot when, there's nobody around him. I think Drew Holiday is a good player. Chris Middleton, good defender, good shooter. A guy last year in the finals who pretty much proved everybody wrong that doubted Chris Middleton throughout his career. Even look at the Toronto Raptors, right? They fit the mold of, they have a Kawhi Leonard who offensively has one of the most potent, efficient games that we've seen enter the league in the last 15 years. Defensively, one of, if not, I wouldn't call him the best on-ball defender in NBA history. He's one of the best defenders in NBA history. And he's surrounded by Pascal Siakam, a guy who defensively is really good. He's an active player who can shoot, who can score, who can rebound, who can play make. Like, today's NBA is based off of if your team can't have 8 to 9 guys that can do almost everything on the NBA court, those guys need to be elite shooters. That's where the Golden State Warriors come in. I don't think you really can say Steph Curry does everything on the floor. He's not an elite rebounder. I would say he's a good playmaker. His assists are always there. You can't say he's a bad playmaker. But obviously his defining quality is shooting, right? And his movement off of the ball. I think you can kind of say the same about Klay Thompson, especially post-injury. The only guy on this team who is not a good shooter, the only 2 guys who play big minutes for this team who aren't good shooters are Draymond and Kevon Looney. So what does Philly have right now? They have a guy who can do a lot in Joel Embiid. He's not going to be, listen, even at 37% shooting from the three-point line, he's making 1 a game on average. If you look at his stat, he's making 1 a game on average. So what does 37% really mean? But he's a good rebounder, obviously. He grabs double-digit rebounds. He's developed into a guy who can make plays out of double teams with the 4 assists he had this year. He can block shots. He can steal. He can get a steal or 2 a game. And he can score 30 a game. He averaged that this year. But he doesn't fit the mold of today's guy who can either do everything with, just compare him to Giannis. I think Giannis does more for Milwaukee than what Joel Embiid does for Philadelphia. And that's not a slight to Joel, because like I said, I think he's the best player in the NBA. But what I think he does for Philly, listen, what he does well is never going to be what Giannis does well. Giannis, his defining quality is his motor, right? He's always going to be playing harder than everybody else on the court. Match that with the craziest athleticism that we've seen enter the league since LeBron. You match that with a improving jump shot from the mid-range, which it's still not good, but it's at least average in today's NBA. I don't want to get in front of Giannis. I don't think anybody wants to get in front of Giannis if he's driving to the hole. That's why you need 3 to 4 guys to stop him. Overall, what Giannis does for Milwaukee, like I said just 30 seconds ago, Giannis does more for Milwaukee than what Joel does for Philly. And again, don't take that as a slight towards Joel, because I've already said I think he's the best player in the NBA. But look at what's around him as well. They're paying Tobias Harris $30+ million. James Harden has a player option for $47 million. Tyrese Maxey is going to be in line for a contract of upwards of $15 to $20 million a year. That's just how it works. The rest of the team is Danny Green, who's going to be coming off of a torn ACL next year. Georges Niang, Furkan Korkmaz, no backup center to speak of. Don't even entertain DeAndre Jordan. Philly is at a certain point with this Joel Embiid situation where, listen, everybody would love to have Joel Embiid on their team. And his value is never going to get higher. And the risk that they run by not trading Joel Embiid now is A, he has another injury in the playoffs next year, which in almost every single playoff run, Joel Embiid has missed major moments during the playoffs. Some of them, not really his own fault. The injury he suffered this year, the orbital fracture, was obviously not at his fault. Listen, there's a bigger conversation to be had about whether or not Doc Rivers should have had him on the floor anyway. But the injury was not his fault. Case in point. But the point still remains is that every single year he's missed major moments during the playoffs because of injury. And he's also had moments where he isn't the most effective either. I think there's series where certain teams he plays against, I don't know how great he would have been in a series against Boston. Because I've never seen him against a defense that elite with big men that great. Between Robert Williams, between Al Horford, even considering Grant Williams. We've never seen Joel go against that kind of team. And against a team like the Golden State Warriors, even in the fact that he has an obvious size advantage over Kevon Looney and Draymond Green, both of those guys have proved, not only in this playoffs, but in playoffs before, that they can compete with guys who are considered more talented and bigger than them. Draymond Green especially. And Kevon Looney is no snub either. Scrub, I guess I should say. Kevon Looney is no scrub either. And listen, like I said, his value is never going to get higher. And the risk that they run as well is, look at what James Harden did twice in a year span. He told the Rockets and he told the Nets, I'm not playing until you trade me to Team X. It's different than just a regular trade demand. Because if Joel Embiid just goes, hey, I want to be traded, Philly is not put in such a bad predicament because now they're getting calls for Joel. But if Joel goes, nah, I'm not playing until you trade me to Miami, or I'm not playing until you trade me to New York, or I'm not playing until you trade me to LA, or whoever it is, the value of Joel automatically sinks. Automatically. Because teams are going to be like, okay, well, this guy wants to go somewhere else anyway. And once his contract runs up, he's not going to re-sign with us anyway, and we're going to lose him for nothing. So why would we give you good trade value for him? And the team that he obviously wants to go to, they're not going to be able to. They're going to be able to have Philly bent over a barrel, because look at what Philly did to Brooklyn when James Harden wanted to be traded. They were able to get James Harden for basically Seth Curry and Andre Drummond. I know a lot of people think that trade value was really bad, but guess what? Brooklyn got a guy in Ben Simmons